is so yummy and tasty nice.
The rain fell hard on the streets of Seoul that Thursday night, the kind of rain that swallowed street lamps whole and turned neon signs into bleeding watercolors on wet asphalt. No one noticed the small figure crouched beneath the awning of a closed flower shop on Mapo-gu's back alley. No one except the cat, orange and scrawny, that pressed its wet side against her knee like it understood loneliness. Her name was Rahina. 6 years old, gap-toothed, braids coming loose on the left side because she'd been sleeping on concrete for 2 nights. She wore a yellow raincoat 3 sizes too big, the kind with a broken zipper and a cartoon duck on the pocket, and she held a half-eaten packet of rice crackers like it was treasure. Because right now it was. Nobody knew how a 6-year-old Nigerian-American girl had ended up alone in one of Seoul's most dangerous neighborhoods. That was a story for later. The story for right now, the story that mattered, began the moment the black SUV convoy rolled slowly down the alley like a funeral procession that hadn't decided on the body yet. 3 vehicles, blacked-out windows, license plates that didn't exist in any government database. Rahina pressed herself flat against the flower shop wall and watched with enormous dark eyes as the cars idled. She was good at being invisible. She'd learned that fast. The men who stepped out first were big. Not Korean, their words floated through the rain and hit her ears strange, rough-edged, and she recognized them because her neighbor back in Atlanta, Mrs. Daria, used to watch old Soviet films on Saturday afternoons. Russian. These men were speaking Russian. Rahina couldn't understand everything, but she understood enough. She'd always had a talent for language the way some kids had a talent for drawing. Her mother used to say Rahina didn't just hear words, she heard intention. And the intention wrapped inside these Russian words was ugly. Cold. Planned. When he steps out, the one they call Yi, you don't wait. The car handles the rest. Rahina's breath stopped. The car handles the rest. She looked at the middle SUV, looked harder. Then she saw it, almost invisible against the black undercarriage, a device. Magnetic. Blinking once every 4 seconds with a tiny red pulse like a heartbeat counting down. She didn't know the technical term, but she knew what it meant. She'd watched enough of her uncle's action movies pressed against the living room wall past her bedtime. A bomb. The Russian men repositioned themselves, 2 lighting cigarettes near the alley entrance, 2 disappearing into a doorway across the street, setting a perimeter, waiting. And the driver of the rigged SUV simply walked away, hands in pockets, whistling something that didn't belong in the rain. Then the door at the far end of the alley opened. He stepped out like the rain parted for him, not because it did, but because that's the way Yi10 moved through the world. Like everything rearranged itself around his presence and simply forgot to inform him. 30 years old, sharp jaw, black coat, hair pushed back with rainwater. He was flanked by 2 of his own men, hands already reaching for phones, heads bowed in conversation about something that didn't know it was about to become irrelevant. He was walking straight toward the SUV. Rahina didn't think. That was the thing people would later not be able to understand. She didn't think. She moved. She shot out from beneath the awning, rice crackers forgotten, yellow raincoat flapping. And she ran directly into the path of Yi10 with all the stopping power of a small, determined comet. Don't get in the car. Her voice cracked across the alley like a whip. Every head turned. Yi's bodyguards had weapons half-drawn before the second heartbeat. Yi himself stopped dead, not from the girl, but from the absolute electric certainty in her voice. That voice didn't belong on a child. That voice belonged to someone who had already seen what happened if he didn't listen. Yagwuryu zhdI poka on edit. Mashina estelayet ostelnoy. The Russian words spilled out of her mouth with the accent of a woman from Volgograd, not a 6-year-old from Atlanta. She didn't translate. She just stared up at him with rain running down her face and crackers crushed in her fist and said it again, quieter this time. Don't get in the car. The alley went very, very still. Yi10 looked down at her. The child was soaking wet. Alone. Her left braid was half undone and hanging over her eye. She looked like she'd been through something that had no business touching a 6-year-old, and yet she was standing between him and a vehicle like she was built out of something harder than concrete. "Nuguya," he said quietly. "Who are you?" "Rahina," she said, "and there's a bomb under the middle one. The man with the gray coat put it there. He left whistling. People who put bombs don't whistle unless it's already done." One of Yi's men made a sound. The other was already on his radio. Yi crouched down to her level, slowly, the way you approach something sacred you don't want to startle, and studied her face. Looking for the lie, looking for the angle, looking for whoever had sent her. He found nothing except a child who was telling the truth. "Ilmana Ori Isyatni, how long have you been out here?" Rahina considered. 2 nights. Something moved behind Yi-1-O's eyes. Something that didn't have a name in the language of Korean Mafia bosses. He straightened up, said 3 words into his earpiece, and 40 seconds later his team had confirmed what the girl had said. The device was real. The Russian crew at the alley entrance, realizing their window was gone, made exactly one bad decision. They reached for their weapons. They did not get a second decision. The next 90 seconds were loud and fast, and Yi kept his body between the noise and Rahina without appearing to think about it, one large hand resting on her shoulder like a wall that had chosen a side. When the alley went quiet again, he looked down at her. She was looking at the flower shop awning she'd been hiding under. "Gajok Isyo, do you have family?" "No," she said, just like that. No drama, no tears. The flattest, truest word in the world. Yi was quiet for a long moment. "You hungry?" Rahina looked at her crushed crackers, looked up at him. "Yeah." The headquarters of Yi-1-O was not what movies taught you to expect from a Korean mafia boss. No red lanterns, no smoke-filled gambling dens, no men sharpening blades in dark corners while someone played mournful string music. It was a penthouse, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over Seoul like the city owed it something, white marble floors, a kitchen that cost more than most people's entire apartments, artwork on the walls that Rahina didn't understand but stared at anyway, long, abstract strokes of black and gold that looked like someone had been very angry and very beautiful at the same time. She stood in the middle of it all in her yellow raincoat, dripping on the marble, and didn't say a word. One of Yi's men, a broad-shouldered man everyone called Dak, watched her like she was a grenade that hadn't decided yet. His hand never fully left his jacket pocket. His eyes tracked her every move with the twitchy precision of someone who had survived a very long time by trusting nothing small and unexpected. "She's 6, Yi said without looking up from the phone he was reading. 6-year-olds don't quote Russian hit orders with a Volgograd accent, Dak replied. This one does. Nobody had a good answer for that. Rahina had stopped dripping by the time the food arrived, jjajangmyeon, black bean noodles, because Yi had asked what she wanted, and she'd said something dark-colored which had made 2 of his men look at each other with deeply unsettled expressions. She sat at the kitchen island on a stool that was too tall for her, feet dangling, eating with a focus that suggested she was treating every bite like it might be the last one for a while. Because experience had taught her it might be. Yi sat across from her, jacket off now, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and just watched her eat. He'd sent 4 men to sweep the area around the alley. He'd made 11 phone calls in the 40 minutes since they'd left the scene. He'd identified the Russian crew, mid-tier operatives connected to a syndicate called Serpent's Mouth, based out of Vladivostok, currently expanding south through Busan and pushing towards Seoul with the patience of people who had survived winters that killed everything else. He knew why they wanted him dead. What he didn't know, what he couldn't stop turning over in the back of his mind like a stone with something living underneath it, was why a 6-year-old American girl had been sitting in that alley, in that rain, at that exact moment. In 30 years of living and 10 years of running the most feared criminal organization in 3 provinces, Yi-1-O did not believe in coincidence. Not even small ones, especially not small ones dressed in yellow raincoats. "How did you get to Seoul?" he asked. Rahina slurped a noodle. "Airplane." "Alone." A pause. "With my mom." The word mom landed differently than the others. flatter, like she'd practiced making it not hurt and hadn't quite gotten there yet. Yi waited. She put her chopsticks down. She'd figured out chopsticks by herself in about 4 minutes, which Dak had watched with an expression approaching religious awe, and she looked at the countertop. She got sick on the plane, the real kind of sick. They took her when we landed, hospital. Her voice was careful, constructed, the kind of careful that belongs to children who have learned that falling apart doesn't actually help anything. I didn't have papers for the hospital. I didn't have any papers. I didn't have a phone. I waited outside for a long time and then some men told me to leave and I got lost and then it was night. That was 2 nights ago. Yeah. You survived 2 nights in Mapogu alone at 6 years old. She looked up at him then, direct, unblinking. I'm good at surviving. Yi 1-0 had sat across from generals, corrupt politicians, rival bosses who had eaten men alive professionally and personally. He had never felt as thoroughly assessed by anyone's eyes as he felt by this child's in this moment. Your mother's name, he said. Amara Diallo. He slid his phone across the counter to Dak with 2 words written on the screen. Dak disappeared without a sound. Rahina watched him do this. Then she picked her chopsticks back up. You're going to find her, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to try. Why? The question sat in the air between them. Honest and direct the way only children and very dangerous people could manage. Yi considered lying. He was extraordinarily good at lying. It was practically a professional qualification. Instead he said, because you saved my life, and I don't leave debts unpaid. Rahina considered this. That's a mafia thing, right? Honor and debts. Yi's mouth moved at one corner, almost. Where did you hear that? Movies, my uncle watches a lot of movies. A pause. You're Mafia, right? I run an organization. That does illegal things. Sometimes. And people are scared of you. Usually. She nodded slowly, processing this the way she seemed to process everything. Not with fear, not with judgment, just with the clear-eyed practicality of someone doing an accurate inventory of their situation. Okay, she said, and went back to her noodles. Yi stared at her for a long moment. He had grown up in this world. He had been handed it at 19 when his father died, not peacefully, not in a hospital bed, and he had carried it every day since with the particular exhaustion of someone who had never been given the option of putting it down. He had people who feared him, people who needed him, people who wanted pieces of him for 100 different reasons that had nothing to do with who he actually was. Nobody had ever just said okay to him like it was simple. Then Dak reappeared in the doorway. His face had changed. Yi read it instantly. What? Amara Diallo, Seoul General. Dak glanced at Rahina, then back at Yi with a look that carried weight. She's there. She's stable, but... Another glance at the girl. But what? Rahina said. Her chopsticks were still. Her voice had gone very quiet and very steady, the way rivers go quiet right before they go fast. Dak looked at Yi. Yi gave a small nod. She's in a medically induced coma, Dak said carefully. They found her without identification. She was listed as an unregistered foreign national. There are government officials involved now. Immigration enforcement. Rahina's hands flattened on the counter. They're going to deport her, Yi said quietly, before she wakes up. The room was very still. Then Rahina lifted her eyes and looked at Yi 1-0 with an expression that was too old for her face and too certain for someone who had spent the last 2 nights hungry and alone and lost. She looked at him the way people look at the one door left in a burning building. Can you stop them? She asked. Yi reached for his phone. I can stop a lot of things, he said. What neither of them knew yet, what would change everything in the next 24 hours, was that the Russian Serpent's Mouth Syndicate had not sent the car bomb as their opening move. They had sent it as a distraction. Their real move was already in motion, and it was pointed not at Yi 1-0. It was pointed at the only thing that had ever made him hesitate. The little girl in the yellow raincoat.